Welcome to the Anonymous Andrew podcast. Life and the choices we make. The choices other people make. Why we choose to ignore the red flags. Red flags like gaslighting, cheating, addiction, mental illness, and much more. What role do they play in relationships? Follow me each week as we discuss these topics with anonymous guests and experts to hopefully become better humans, resulting in better choices. Like I say, been there, still doing that. Now on to the show. Welcome to another episode of Anonymous Andrew. Just a little intro again. Today's guest is a amazing woman who I came across her story. She's also a fellow podcaster. She has a show called Even Tacos Fall Apart. And when I read her story and her bio, it just, sometimes when we look back at our own trauma and our own issues and the things that we've gone through, my story, I think was, from my perspective, horrible from my early years of alcoholism all the way up to the present day. And then you read, hear, or talk to somebody else who went through stuff that I have never even imagined that one can go through and still come out on the other end in one piece. And not only in one piece, but better, as a better person, which is what I'm striving to do here. And with the podcast is, if nothing, we learn from either the mistakes we've made in our past or the people that we've got involved with, and either that relationship was a mistake or etc. When it's over, we feel dark and alone, and we feel like there's no future and yada, yada. But it's what we end up with months later, whether it's 5 months, 6 months, or a year later, or several years later. You are much stronger and better from having gone through that experience. This episode will show you that. Her name is Mommafoxfire, and she'll tell you exactly how she got that name, but her story is just amazing, and I give her a lot of credit. So, and as I always do, folks, please, this is I'm doing this podcast alone, and it's free, and all I ask of you is if you could just take 1 minute and give me a review. If you're on Apple or Spotify, or if your platform that you're listening to allows you to give a rating and a review, just stop for 1 minute and scroll down to the bottom, I think, where it's at, and please give me some stars and a review. It would really help with the algorithm and pushing this podcast up. Okay, enjoy this next episode with Mommafoxfire. Ciao. Hello, everybody. Anonymous Andrew back with you once again. And today I have a very special guest. I have Mommafoxfire with me, and she is a mental health advocate, a single mom, and a full-time proposal manager in the AEC industry, and she'll explain what that is. I'm reading off a bio, Mama, but it's too long to read, so I'm going to throw it to you. So good afternoon and welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm really happy to be here. Yeah, AEC is architecture, engineering, and construction. So I work in that industry full time, and then I do everything else on the side in my quote unquote spare time.
Excellent. Okay. I came across Momma. My audience knows that I go through several venues, and Momma and I connected on a website, and I found her story just very intriguing, and we have something in common. We're both mental health advocates, but Momma has a very oh gosh, I don't even know how to say it about your story. So Momma, I guess let's start with your story. By the way, Momma is a podcaster as well. She has a podcast show called Even Tacos Fall Apart. And I think that's a great name. That's just a great name.
Thank you.
So I don't know. Take it from there. Tell us your story from wherever you want to start.
Yeah. So, I mean, there are lots of places to start. We were talking before this about just everything that I've been through. And it's funny because, you know, you grow up and it's like, oh, pretty normal childhood and everything. And of course, everyone has trauma in their childhood, right? Even if you had a completely normal childhood. Parents are human and therefore fuck up. And that's okay. Oh, can I cuss on this podcast?
Absolutely. Go for it.
All right, good. Good. All right, good. So yeah, I mean, parents mess up. No one is perfect. I'm a parent. I mess up. So it's funny growing up in this like normal kind of childhood and thinking that you're pretty healthy, pretty happy and everything, and how you can go from that to finding yourself in a situation that is truly traumatic. And that's kind of what happened to me. So before everything, not bad, but everything on my timeline started, you know, I had a baby as a single mother when I was 21. And that was before I met my husband. And after that happened, it was kind of like I became an adult and all these things started happening. So since then, I've been through a lot. I've been through an abusive marriage. I've been through some medical issues with pelvic organ prolapse and carpal tunnel syndrome and like all of these different things. My grandfather went missing and, you know, all of these things that happened. And the kind of the end result was me becoming a mental health advocate. So that is that's what drew me. All of my experiences are what drew me into being a mental health advocate. So, but I'm happy to talk about whatever you want to talk about. I mean, we talked about focusing on the relationship, so we can do that if you want.
There's something that caught my eye on your website. Her website is tacosfallapart.com. It's a very good website. And in the frequently asked questions section, and I get this sometimes myself. While we're mental health advocates, which means that we advocate for either we have a mood disorder or a mental health issue, and we advocate for others that do. People don't understand that some of the best support that you could get is from a mental health advocate or a peer. Yeah. We're peers, right? Peer to peer. I run a peer-to-peer support group. My audience knows a little bit about it. I haven't gone into it too much, but I see that you have on your FAQs, you have like, you're not a doctor. So how can you talk about mental health? People don't get that sometimes the peer, us, know more about mental health than the doctors do. I mean, obviously they do prescribe the meds and they do help us in many, many ways. I've been in therapy my whole life, but that's kind of ironic. If I've been in therapy my whole life and I'm still not getting it right, you know, so I find peer-to-peer support groups and more helpful than the doctor sometimes, because you understand. If I tell you that I'm depressed, you know what that means.
Right.
If I tell you I have anxiety, you understand what that means. So, wow, there's a lot to cover here.
Well, if I can just jump in on that, like I've had people, so I am not a mental health professional. I don't work in the mental health profession. I have no ties. I have never done any studies on, like, none of my coursework was on psychology. I think I took maybe one psychology course because it was required. So I'm not a mental health professional in any way, shape, or form. And I've had people in the past, not recently, but in the past, say like, you shouldn't be talking about this. You're not qualified to talk about this. And my response is always like, no, I'm not. And I make it very clear that I am not qualified to do any diagnosing, any medication, anything. And I don't ever do that kind of thing. But there is such a job that can be done and that needs to be done that mental health professionals cannot do. And that is to be that advocate. And so if you're going to a mental health professional and you're in therapy, which I highly recommend, I think that everyone at some point in their life would benefit from therapy. But they can't talk as openly as you can talk to someone else who has experienced something similar.
Correct. Absolutely.
And they don't always, you know, they go into a session with like, okay, here are my resources. Here are my recommendations. Here is this information. And I come at it from a perspective of, here's a lot of things that you could look at. Here's a lot of different things that you could learn from. Here's a lot of people that we can connect you with. Here, peer support forums are a huge help. Just getting someone to validate what you're feeling, what you're going through is something that a mental health professional doesn't necessarily do. It's not in their purview. So I view those as two very different things, a mental health professional and a mental health advocate, but they work together. Like, you need both.
Correct. Oh yeah. I when I was running, there was an organization, I'm not going to mention the name, but I was running an organization, a franchise, and we had a family division. So the family members, something along the lines of Al-Anon. So if your son or husband was diagnosed with bipolar or something, they could come to these meetings to understand about the mental illness, and it would be other family members, and they often would call if their husband was having a manic episode. I would get calls sometimes at 11 o'clock at night and say, what do I do?
Yeah.
Because yes, you can call 911. Yes, you can call an ambulance, but they could take 20 minutes to get there, or sometimes I've seen horrible. You hear what happens in the news sometimes when the police get involved. Sometimes the person gets shot. I can tell them what to do or what not to do to maybe keep themselves safe and whatever. Anyway, we're getting off topic.
That's my specialty, is getting off topic, by the way.
I'm just advocating for being an advocate for mental health.
Absolutely.
Because I've been manic. I've been through it. I know what not to say to the person to trigger them even more, or what the husband or wife should do, maybe to keep themselves safe if he's, whatever. So, well, we talked about a few minutes ago about, so if you'd said to me that you're going through depression, I would know exactly what you're going through. And people who don't have depression don't understand. I've heard people say, why can't you just get out of bed and what do they say? Just get over it, get up and push through it. It's not that simple. So unless you've been there, you don't really truly understand it. Now I'm going to segue that into your marriage.
Sure.
You were married with the man you mentioned. You said after you had the first baby, you got a husband, and I don't think you mentioned it yet, but we did it in the pre-interview. He had an affair. Can you talk about that a little bit? Because that's what happened to me. People don't understand that when infidelity happens in a relationship, it sucks. It really
does. It really does. It's very painful. And just, I want more people to understand that betrayal trauma is a thing. It's not just, oh, he cheated, that sucks. Like, there is a trauma there that a lot of people don't recognize as real trauma. And it's, aside from the fact that it was an abusive relationship, mentally, emotionally, and sexually, that trauma is probably what tripped me up more than some of the abuse. So I met a man in 2009. We started dating. We got married a couple years later in 2011. And almost overnight, like, he went from being an okay guy, maybe not the best. I ignored some red flags. I won't lie about that. Right. So there were signs. Sure, I ignored them. We got married, and then those signs went from little red flags to giant red flags. And he went from being this charming person to being really manipulative, aggressive. And a few years later, I found out that he was having an affair. And so we got married in 2011, and I found out in 2015 that he was having an affair. And I found out at the same time that he had another affair prior to that. And I found that out because the person who he was having an affair with, I actually got to talk to her before I talked to him about it. And so while I was talking to her, and I made it clear to her, everyone handles this differently, right? You find out that your partner is cheating, and you're mad at your partner, you're mad at the affair partner, you're mad at both, whatever it is. I focused my anger, disappointment, hurt, everything on my husband. So when I was able to talk to his affair partner, I explained to her, like, look, I'm not mad at you. Your problems are your problems. I just want information. And so when I was talking to her, I asked for several details so that he couldn't deny it. And then I asked kind of towards the end of the conversation, I said, hey, do you happen to know if he's had any other affairs? And she said, yeah.
Oh.
And I asked for some details on that. And yeah, so that was the first one that I found out about. And also the second one that I found out about at the same time. We did a lot of work. We went to counseling together. The counseling didn't work as well as I was hoping that it would. But we had, an affair recovery program that we went through, and that was good. It was fine. I thought we were working on things. I did convince myself to stay for the kids, which I don't recommend doing, by the way. That's a terrible idea.
Mm-hmm.
But I did it. I made a lot of bad choices. I hope that people can learn from my bad choices, because I made a lot of bad ones.
Momma, that's why I'm doing this podcast, because the bad choices that I made. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yep, absolutely. But then a few years later, I did find out that he was having another affair. And then I filed for divorce, and he finally moved out in December of 2019. So just a few months before COVID, and thank everything that he did move out before COVID. That would have been a nightmare.
Oh, that would have been a nightmare. Absolutely.
Yeah. So, I mean, I skipped over a lot of details, but I'm happy to talk about anything in there that you want to.
What in the beginning of that story, you talked about the trauma that comes with it, and I just, for people who are either single or have never experienced infidelity, or for anybody, it's extremely traumatic, especially when the monogamous partner is. And, you mentioned you went to counseling. It takes two. He would have to want to make it work.
Yeah.
Did he just go along? If they just go along to placate you, it's not going to work. It's like somebody, it's like an alcoholic going to AA, but he doesn't want to get sober. He's not going to get sober,
Right.
You're going to go to therapy. If you're not really interested in getting help, whether it's for couple counseling or a mental health issue, if you're in denial or you just don't, not going to work.
Well, I'll tell you a quick story about therapy and couples therapy. So this was actually my first experience with a therapist. I had a therapist for myself. This did prompt me to start going to therapy. She was terrible. She was awful. She sucked as a therapist. And I thought that's how all therapy was. It's not, by the way. If you have a bad therapist, you have a bad therapist. You need to find another one. But we also went to couples therapy together to a different therapist. And we went to, I think, 4 or 5 sessions, and we left the session, and my ex said, I can't win in therapy, so we're not going anymore. And I was like, it's not about winning. It's about trying to figure out what is happening, where we are, where we need to go, all this stuff. And he was like, yeah, but every time we go in there, the therapist is just like, not on my side.
Right. That's what
I wanted to be like, well, that's because you're wrong. but I didn't. But we didn't. And so we stopped going. And it's like, you're right. If one person is not in it, if one person is not willing to do the work, if one person is not willing to cop to anything that is their issue, then it's not worth the time and money that you're spending to go to therapy.
Accountability.
Yeah, exactly.
Accountability. I think I read somewhere in your story that one of your husband's, the people that the woman he had an affair with, that the husband, her husband stalked you.
Oh yeah, that was in like 2016. So it was the year after I found out. And so the affair partner's husband started stalking my husband. I didn't know about it. And then I found out because he started texting me. And he started texting me saying, like, you need to get your husband to kill himself. To which I was just like, you need therapy. Go get yourself some help.
Wow.
And because I wasn't responsive, I guess, to his texts like he wanted me to be, he started stalking me and the kids as well. And he would start sending texts like, oh, I saw you at that soccer game, or I saw you at the park, or, I saw you on the highway or whatever. And he would like name what color my shirt was or something. And so it was clear that he was actually stalking me. And the first call that I made was to the non-emergency line to ask like, hey, is there anything that can be done about this? And they told me, we're sending out a sheriff's deputy and we will make a police report. Next time, call 911 because it is a threat directly to you. And so I can't tell you how many times I called 911. I can't tell you how many police reports I filed. I can't tell you how many sheriff's deputies that I talked to, but it was largely kind of we can't do anything about it until something real happens, which sucks. Like that is some bullshit, And so I got my concealed handgun license and started carrying everywhere because I was truly afraid for my life, for my kids' lives, of course, for my husband's life, but not as much if I'm being honest. And finally, one of the sheriff's deputies said, look, here's what I want you to do. And this was after probably, 30 or 40 different calls that I had to make to 911. He said, look, this is what I want you to do. You're not going to get the attention on this case unless you make yourself a huge bother. Calling us out is not a bother. Like calling 911, having us make a police report, that's not a bother. It's what we do. It's our jobs. He said, I want you to go to the sheriff's department downtown Fort Worth and sit there until they talk to you in person at the sheriff's office, at their department. And so I did. I went down there and sat there, and they talked to me. They got all the information. They took my phone for a day, got all of the texts and everything off of that they could, all of the records of phone calls that had gone ignored and everything. They had my husband come in and turn his phone over, which he didn't like because then not only was I not available via my phone, but then he didn't have his phone also. So that was a big issue later. But yeah, and so we did that. We got all of that taken care of at the sheriff's department. I hired a lawyer, had them send a cease and desist letter to him, to his wife, to his job. And then he was finally arrested, which is unusual for that to happen in cases of harassment and stalking. That is highly unusual. And he did go to jail, and I never heard from him again. So yeah, it was terrifying. It really was.
Oh, I'm hesitant to even bring this up. I am being stalked, and I don't know if it's the ex or somebody else, but I've had a stalker for quite some time, and it's terrifying. And what you're in what state?
I'm in Texas.
Texas, yeah. So getting a carry conceal license is probably a lot easier. I'm in New York, and it's not quite as easy.
Well, it's real easy now in Texas. You don't even have to have one anymore. But back then, you had to go through a certain amount of training and a class and prove that you knew what you were doing with a weapon.
Yeah, I mean, I do own firearms, and they're legal.
Yeah,
but I can't carry them on the street.
Yeah.
But they're here in the house, which is just I guess for peace of mind.
Yeah.
Because when you have a stalker and you don't know who's knocking at that door or who's creeping in your window or whatever. I've often said to people I've given the key, like years ago, to my girlfriend or even my sons. I say, some of them have a key to my house. I will say, do not come in the house at 2:00 in the morning without announcing yourself, because you're going to find a shotgun in your face.
Yeah.
And so they know to call before they come over, or text me, or even if this is when they were younger, if they were drunk and they didn't want to drive home or whatever, and I just said, please call me. Do not open up that door at 2 a.m, because you're not going to like what you find on the other side. So, Gosh, there's so many questions I want to talk. I may have to have you back.
I'd be happy to come back anytime.
Yeah.
I mean, listen, there's a lot to everything that I've been through. Even just in my marriage, there's a lot. And then outside of that, there's a lot too. So
If you're comfortable about it, I know you have several children, and there's that in itself. You have a whole story, I believe.
yeah.
Are you comfortable with that?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So I have 2 kids who are mine that I birthed.
Okay.
And then I have my ex had 2 kids who were my stepsons for the years that we were married, and I still keep in contact with them. And now one of them even has a baby of his own. So
so you're a grandma.
Yeah. So
congratulations.
thanks. It's kind of tough to keep in touch with kids who used to be your stepkids. Sometimes it's a little awkward, but fortunately, they're great kids and they're willing to keep that contact. So it's been really a blessing. But my 2 kids and I are, living on our own. So it's been challenging, especially with COVID. It was challenging to be a single parent. At the time, my youngest was in kindergarten.
Wow.
And so and I was working full time still. So, and I work from home, and during COVID, I worked from home as well. So it was like, I would be in a meeting and then I'd have to run out and say, are you still listening to your teacher on that Zoom call, or are you playing a game on the Disney website? Right. And 99% of the time he was on PBS Kids playing a game, or the Disney website playing a game. And it was just such a hassle. But yeah, I mean, I think my kids are pretty well adjusted. My oldest is in therapy, and it helps a lot for him to just have someone else to talk to. Of course, he can talk to me about anything, but sometimes you just don't want to talk to your parent about something, So, and then my 9-year-old, he's not in therapy. I do have him go to a therapy session once or twice a year just to kind of check in and make sure there's nothing he needs to talk about. And I recommend that. I treat it like it's an annual doctor's appointment kind of, or,
Good.
biannual dentist appointment. It's good to just check in once in a while with somebody who is a professional.
And I said before that I've been in therapy all my life, and it didn't work. That's not entirely true. And what you said about therapy or the therapist, if you don't like them or there's not a match, that's part of the problem, is that if you go to see a therapist, it could take 3 to 6 to 9 months to know whether that therapist is actually a good fit for you, just like a relationship. Because there's also that trust issue. How much do you open up to this therapist? And
right.
So there are times when I would go see a therapist, and 6 to 9 or even a year later, I realize we're not going anywhere, or he or she is not helping me the way that I think that I need to help. So then you have to go look for another one. And then it's, ironically, it's like a relationship. You get in, almost like a whole year went by and you wasted a year with this person. And that's some bitterness that I have with my ex relationship, is that I wasted 2.5 years with this woman who I really thought was my life future. And at my age, I'm 63. We start thinking about mortality at this point. I know what age my parents died. I know, and I have some medical conditions myself. So we start to think about, and here's the syndrome, like, am I going to die alone? Am I ever going to find somebody? Because I've been doing the same mistakes, same patterns over and over again, making the same mistakes, or what's that expression? Doing the same thing over and over, expecting different results. Yeah, I just went off on a tangent there. I have a question about something that we talked about earlier, but tell me a little bit about how you began the process of healing once you got out of the marriage. That must have been tough. I dealt with this infidelity, and it was just traumatic, like we talked about. What was your healing process journey? What did it look like? And
Yeah. So my healing process is probably super highly specific to me.
Okay.
Because I was healing from this at the same time as I was healing from the disappearance of my grandfather. And so my grandfather went missing in 2017, and I was still working on, I was in therapy to try to deal with the emotions around that, and the uncertainty around everything. And then in 2018, I found out that my ex-husband was having another affair. And so it kind of was just like it coincided with both, because that had brought up a whole bunch. Like I said, we went through an affair recovery program. I had been in therapy already for that. And then I was in therapy again for Papa's disappearance. And it's like it just kind of all came together. And so because I was already trying to heal, and honestly, like I was trying to hide from a lot, right? So I was trying to make these different connections and everything, as far outside of my own self as I could. And I credit my, and this is going to sound probably not the way that I want it to sound, but I credit my grandfather's disappearance with a lot of really good things that came out of it. And that's kind of the silver linings. Like you have to find a lot of good stuff. But at the same time, as I was trying to heal from that, I improved my relationship with my sister a lot, the sister that's closest to me. I have two sisters, but and we started talking every night. And then she was like, hey, install this program called Discord so we can talk without holding phones to our ears. And so I installed Discord. We started talking every day. And then she was like, hey, you want to play this game with me? And I grew up as a kid. I liked games. As a young adult, I was a big gamer. When I started in my relationship, I was still gaming. And then I kind of stopped gaming because my ex looked down on it so much. He didn't like it. He didn't like that I had my own thing. He didn't like that I enjoyed something that he didn't understand. He didn't like that I had a hobby that didn't include him. And even though I offered like, hey, you could always play with me, like I could teach you this game and stuff, he never really, he wasn't interested in even trying. And he would say, oh, you're still playing games. Aren't you an adult? Like it's stupid to still play games. And looking back at that, like I shouldn't have listened, but I did. So I stopped gaming for a really long time. But whenever I reconnected with my sister, she's always been a big gamer. And she started having me play a couple games with them. And I got back into it. And it was really something that gave me a connection. It gave me social interaction with people that I didn't know yet. And it gave me that connection with her again. And having a connection with someone who's going through something similar, not the infidelity, betrayal trauma, anything like that, but the trauma of losing a relative in such an awful way, where you don't have answers. So having someone going through something similar and just being able to connect with them and talk through everything, we connected over gaming a lot. And that was one of the big things that I definitely relied on for a lot of healing, was just the ability to get out of my own head for a little while, get into a game for a little while, and then connect with my sister, connect with other gamers to just talk through some things that I was going through. And there were a lot of people who would join the call that we were on, and we would be talking about something that we were struggling with. And they would be like, oh man, of course I haven't been through your situation, but I dealt with depression in my own way when my mom died, or I had a lot of trauma from this relationship that I was in, or they would just start relating their own stories, which was really cool. And just something that I wish everyone had. I wish everyone had that opportunity to say, hey, me too. Here's what I've been through. And hear that other people go through shit too. It's not just you. It's not just me. It's everyone. Everyone is impacted by mental illness and mental health, whether they have struggled through it themselves or they have a loved one who did. So a lot of my healing was around gaming. A lot of it was therapy. A lot of it was just social connection.
And you just answered the second question. I was going to ask you about your gaming because we talked
Mm,
about it earlier, and you had told me that your handle Foxfire, right,
yeah.
started from my one of my sons who actually I did an interview on my podcast because the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, and he happens to have the same pattern of behavior with women that
Mm,
I do, and he's in his 30s. He met somebody on I guess Xbox or something, and one of those games they were playing,
hmm
and he just I don't know how to explain this. He introduced me to this guy because he had the same story that I had about what happened to him, his ex-girlfriend. So I connected with him, and ultimately he became a guest on my podcast as well through a
Oh,
gaming thing.
that's cool.
Gaming is
Yeah.
you're right. There's a lot of good networking that
hmm
happen in gaming. And I wanted to mention something and ask you another question. You said that you tried to get your husband into gaming, or he was
hmm
jealous of your gaming. I
Yeah.
had that same experience. There was absolutely nothing in my relationship with my ex that she was interested in that I did.
Yeah.
Um, uh, I can mention several of my hobbies, whatever, but she wasn't interested. But if
hmm
something that she did, I had to be interested in it, or she wanted me to get involved in it.
Exactly.
And
Yes.
this is where the term narcissism, and I'm not calling her a narcissist, but the narcissistic spectrum comes in. It's all about what they want. It's all about
hmm
what makes them happy. And it was interesting that it was only certain things that I was involved in. This second life that she had, this other life that she had of in the sex world, of course, I didn't know anything about. But if there were
hmm
other things that she was involved with, she wanted me, and she was into animal rescue, and she wanted me to get involved with that, and which is great. I have no problem with that. But she had no interest in anything that I did, any of my
Yeah.
hobbies. You have mentioned this a couple of times, and I'm just curious.
hmm
Your grandfather went missing. Do
hmm
you ever know what happened? I mean, what's the story behind that, if you're comfortable with that?
Yeah. So my grandfather went missing in 2017, and he was missing for 6 years, and they just discovered his remains earlier this year.
Oh,
They
sorry.
still don't know if it was the predominant theories are suicide or murder, and they still don't have answers because the remains were obviously not anything that you can
Yeah.
identify a lot of soft tissue injuries or anything, but they don't have answers. So it is still an open case. We actually had a burial, memorial service
Oh,
yesterday
good.
for him, which was great. Finally, lay him to rest, give him a final resting place. It's one of those things that I knew we'd had kind of vigils and that kind of service before, but I knew that we just needed give the family closure. I feel like even though we don't have answers, I equate it to when someone gets cancer, you don't have answers either. You don't know why they got cancer. You don't know, all of the universal, like why them, why this family, why now. They had so much more to do, to give, everything. It's the same with a terminal illness. You just don't get the answers that you're wanting. So to me, the closure is
Closure.
just he's finally laid to rest. He has a final resting place. We had a service. Everyone was able to honor his memory. And we may never know what happened. We may never actually get answers. But yeah, so that all just kind of happened this year, past few months.
Um, Mama, I just find you to be an amazing woman. The stories,
Thank you.
um, just before we got on, I was, as I said, looking through your website, and just the about me page, or whatever that's called,
Mm-hmm.
was just amazing as I scrolled through it. You have been through so much. It's an amazing feat that you're standing or sitting right now, but I'm being metaphorical, that you have survived all of this,
mm-hmm.
and you're able to sustain a lifestyle that,
Mm-hmm.
and you're a podcaster. The I find the gaming to be, I I I I don't think people look at gaming the way it's a, to me, and it's an enigma. I just don't get it. But for you, it's something that, and I saw the connection that my son did it and he connected and I connected with the person that he, whatever. It's just, everybody has to find something that helps them heal or helps them get out of their head.
Yeah.
For me, it was alcohol and drugs for so long. And thank God I was able to put that down. But today it's finding something else. And now this podcast has become my getting out of my head. It's like talking to people like you. It's tremendous help. Momma, anything else you would like to tell us? I think we should have you back, in 6 months or so. We'll talk again, but any parting thoughts, any advice for anybody that, let's say, in the mental health community?
Yeah, I would love to join you again and talk about anything you want. Like I said, I'm an open book. So there is a lot of stuff. There's a lot of shit in my life, and I'm happy to talk about any of it, because I truly do think that sharing your story or some part of your story can just help someone else. Like if I had heard, and that's probably the takeaway that I would like to leave as well. If I had heard someone talk about emotional abuse a little more, if I had heard someone talk about mental abuse, if I'd heard someone talk about signs of a bad relationship, it might have prevented a lot of things. Now, would I change anything? No, because I have a beautiful child, my youngest, out of this relationship. But would I have ended things a little earlier and spared myself some additional trauma? Probably, So if you see that someone you love is in a relationship that is not healthy, if you are in a relationship that is not healthy and you recognize some red flags, which there are a lot of, I mean, we didn't even really talk about some of the red flags that were there, but there are so many different things that you might not recognize as a red flag. Do a little research, read a little bit about other people's stories, and then make a plan to get yourself out safely, and then carry out that plan and ask for help. That's one of the things that I wish I had done more, was ask for help and connect with people. I was so isolated, because that is part of the abuse, was isolation, but I was so isolated from everyone that I knew and loved. Yep. There was no way they could have helped me. I wish I had done more to maintain those relationships, and I'm still working to rebuild them. But if you're in a bad relationship, make a plan to get out safely, and then do so when it is safe.
Yeah. There is help, and there is hope, and there is life after what's for me, when something as traumatic as the infidelity and the relationship ending, and you think you're alone, and you're in this dark world, and you think there's nothing after that there is, because here it is. I'm post 7 months now, and I'm in a much different place than I was 7 months ago. And I see that you are too. I think you are. Yeah. And she's smiling, and I love that. Okay. Yeah. Momma, thank you so much for coming on. We're going to put all of your information in the show notes. I think you hang out on Twitter and Twitcher and Discord.
Yep. I'm everywhere as Mommafoxfire. So
Mommafoxfire, you're an amazing woman. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
Okay. Wow, what an amazing woman. Amazing story. Thank you so much, everybody, for listening to Anonymous Andrew's Life and the Choices We Make. If you could just take 1 minute, please, and leave me a review. Some stars would be nice, and I can continue to bring you this wonderful content. I'm learning so much. I hope you are too. And please, please choose wisely. Ciao.